Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Opinionated SEO Opinions. And this time we are together with someone I was lucky enough to catch at Brighton SEO this April. We are here with Nadia Mojahed to discuss everything international SEO. Welcome, Nadia.
Thank you so much for having me today. And hello, everyone. I'm glad to be collaborating together with Tori, Sam, and Bigam. I'm excited to share some tips and challenges that I face and learnings when it comes to particular topics around international SEO. To introduce myself, for those who doesn't know me, I am a digital and SEO consultant. So I've been working in the digital marketing field since more than 13 years. I worked in the different digital marketing sides, whether like Google AdWords, social media, email marketing, web development, WordPress development. But then I wanted to really specialize in SEO because I really loved it. And actually, since 3 years, I'm working independently, and I had also the pleasure to collaborate with the Gray company on very interesting projects. I handle international websites and various sectors, whether SaaS, fintech, legal, governmental website, e-commerce, you name it. And so I originally come from Jordan, and that's why my mother tongue is Arabic. And I speak good German and good French as I live in Switzerland. So yeah.
Very cool.
We are so lucky to get to collaborate with you and have you join us today. Thank you.
Thank you, Tari. It's always a pleasure.
We have our hosts, Story Gray and Sam Torres from the Grey Company, as always. Hello to you too. Hope you're all doing well.
Yeah, it's Monday. Woo!
Woohoo! Whether it's going to be published on another Monday.
Probably not going to be published on a Monday, but just so y'all know, we're recording on a Monday, so it's fine.
Yes, that's our amazing fun activity to do on Mondays that is going to motivate us to look forward to Mondays.
Yes, that.
Make yourself something like this, everyone. Yeah. So, an additional tip to this episode is to have something fun to do on Mondays for your sake and like mental health at work. Yes, I'm sure Nadia has some bits that are going to further motivate us for Mondays. So, shall we get started?
Let's do it.
Yay. So the first question would be, Nadia, what are practical ways to approach budget and prioritization for translation projects with multiple languages?
I found actually that is useful to take the translation project step by step. So many clients think of a translation in terms of having this content and then sending it to a translator and then receiving back the piece of content and then verifying if that falls within the context, like checking if the translation went correct or not. Mm-hmm. But actually there are also, not saying that that's a wrong way or they shouldn't do that, but there are also other practical ways to make the translation more efficient, especially like when you have content optimization as well included. So what I follow actually as a process for translating paid content, especially when we have different language variations. Here in Switzerland, we have some companies really basically target 6 languages at the same time. So what I do is that I rely actually as a first step on Google Translate to have just like the basic version of the content. And within that content, I integrate the keywords that are already planned in the AI structure of the website. To make sure that those keywords are not replaced and are not translated, I highlight them in the Word document. And then I share them with a local speaker in order to proofread the content and use the terms that we can change, that we are not like we're not targeting as a keywords, because sometimes it's good to target different keywords that are very specific to the local language, and as well that is used generally within that language. So not to miss for keyword opportunities, especially if the topics are new to the market or people are used to search with generic like non typically very local keywords. I found it very much more time efficient to do the basic setup to prepare the content for content proofreading rather than translating when we're not talking about really niche topic, or like when the topics are about the normal sports, lifestyle, home, e-commerce websites. When it comes to very niche medical websites or maybe legal websites, etc., then part of it could work, but you need as well to integrate. You need to know the language in order to know, like when you do this translation, to verify, to read quickly before doing the proofreading, and before going into details, you need to know the language in general in order to see that if that is going within the context or not. And of course, then the local person who proofreads is good as well. It's very important if you want to approach this process to have them as well speaking English, so that they understand as well what's the context in English. So that also makes having a better quality for the translation, and reducing the time and iteration going back and forward, and maintaining the keywords as well within the text.
Yep. When those projects are budget limited, I've heard you speak a little bit about how to prioritize across languages. How have you approached that before?
Basically, I do some research beforehand, because for clients, they don't know that which language what's the opportunity for their website, and which language that drives them better clicks or impressions. I find it very useful to do this keyword research beforehand, not necessarily following keyword volumes, because as many of us know that especially in small market like Switzerland, there are no search volumes. Switzerland has 4 languages, and it's Google doesn't show search volumes for those little volumes of keywords. Also in business to business, we cannot rely really on search volumes for keywords. So basically, how relevant and popular the topic is through the keywords that Google suggests on SERPs, on result pages, how many keyword variation, for example, in Google Keyword Planner, how many keyword variations related to the topic are there? So many, even if they are 0 to 10, are there? Social media is very important resource to see like the popular topics, the trends are going there, and as well Google Search Console, because it gives like good information if the website is already published.
Gotcha.
What do you think, Tori? Like, do you have like any thoughts on that as well?
I think that makes sense. I mean, what I'm hearing is you're using search market research to really vet the size of the market, and that helps you determine, by language, by region, where to go forward, and where you're limited by third-party search volume data, then you're relying on some of these other tools, which I think leads us into our next question. So I think that makes a tremendous amount of sense to me. Any other additions, Megan, Sam?
I think it's wonderful that you're taking, oh, sorry, Sam. It's amazing that you're taking a look at like multiple data sources and you're trying to get all the value out of there. And I think when it comes to that, the market saturation is very important too. So for different languages in Swiss market, for example, I think it can be a good opportunity to take a look at the competitors and see what they're going after. And also even aggregators. Sometimes they just go after very niche and long tail keywords to get all the companies, for example, for B2B, just list out all the companies that are working in that field, etc. So yeah, using everything that you can from the SERPs. And I think we always put emphasis on how important SERP and competitor analysis is. So this is another point that it comes very important and handy.
Yeah. So first off, as you know, someone who has worked really only in the States, and we've worked with international clients, but most of the time, probably 95% of the time, our clients are working in English. Really interesting to hear about the different search volumes across, really just different markets, and how search volume is almost not applicable or not relevant information. So kind of love that. I'd also wonder, how would you approach, so I think we've probably all had it, where the clients really want to go ahead and spam to like 150 languages, and they're not going to take the time or put together the budget to have some custom curation. What are ways that you've kind of, like, obviously we all know that could be a PR nightmare, right? You might say something completely inappropriate and not realize it. Do you have any steps or tricks on, how do you scale that? How do you try to be responsible about it when your hands are really tied and you're going to have to do it anyways, which is awful, by the way. Please, companies, don't do that.
Or how do you convince them otherwise?
Yeah.
When that happens to you, Nadia, what do you do?
I mean, I always make sure to pass the content to like I always push to have like local speakers checking the content. I don't let content be posted, or like when I work with companies at the beginning, I see that they just like apply, like those plugins to translate. And then that's one of the topics that I start with them when we are signing the contract, that we need to just check those kind of content, because it's so hard for me to take responsibility about the SEO project when there are like different variation of content languages that are posted without checking them. So I can't be responsible about them.
Yeah. That is actually super interesting, because it sounds almost like, whereas we come with a relatively privileged background, being mostly based in the US, having a large search volume overall, and, English speaking companies moving into other regions and just wanting it to magically work and put it up with a bunch of languages. Whereas you're based in a small country that has 4 languages. So they already know they can't get away with that, because they have to speak to those 4 different people, and that is their target market. So it'll be interesting as internationalization continues, just to see, I don't know, failed expansions and what happens in terms of companies falling down, especially the US based variety that try and pull that crap, and just keep not succeeding, because it becomes more competitive, because the international markets are stepping it up in ways that the companies don't always over here. Some do, some definitely do. But
yeah, but I like your call out of basically just setting expectations and almost having it like, and maybe you have it in the contract, maybe you don't, but just almost having the written expressed, like, it's not your responsibility if they're not going to take your advice or they're not going to take your expertise. I think that's something, especially as SEO consultants or agencies, we can probably do more of just, like I say, setting those expectations and being really clear of like, hey, this is in my control and this is not. And I think this is definitely one of those areas where that's really important.
Yeah. And usually actually companies, sometimes it's just like it's an additional process that they need to add to their process. So they usually they don't want to do it, but then when I offer to do it part of this service, but they need to agree that this has to be implemented, then they agree on taking that, because it's just like, oh, how are we going to be looking, who's going to be responsible from the team on researching for a local content proofread, when to do it before and after, but offering that part of the service and including it, and just like agreeing that they are willing to change that or adapt that helps as well. Like it's very important that that clients for me know that not every piece of content need to be optimized in terms of SEO. So there are some pages that are important in this language versus others that are more important that need to be optimized. So if we have a limited budget to be more efficient, then we can say that we agree to optimize, let's say 10 pages. For those 10 pages, that can be different language variations, and we don't need to optimize like every page. Translation and proofreading by local language speakers are always important, because then you need the translation. When you have the link, you need the different the translations. But when it comes to optimization, it's not like translation that you need to optimize every page. So based on the market research, like based on the user needs and the user needs, then we decide which language variations that we can translate.
Let's talk a little bit about how you approach localized keyword research for small countries with limited search volume, especially when it comes to niche fields, which makes everything harder.
It's basically, I go deeper into like checking different tools. I use definitely just like for an introduction on the topics and the related topics to see where the website stands in terms of the digital presence. I check the Google Search Console. I check the Google Keyword Planner. Again, not for search volumes, because I don't rely on them, because there are lots of even like if there are high search volumes, but then they don't drive really traffic, or they don't answer users' questions, then what's the use of them? So I really rely on Google Search Console, the different tools available, whether Keyword Planner, whether Google Search itself, I rely on it a lot. The autocomplete, the top of the page, the relevant related keywords. A tool that really helps with researching on SERPs is Keywords Everywhere. So it just like speeds up the relevant keywords, relevant questions, like on the go. I find it very useful, and it's very budget efficient as well. I conduct actually user reviews. So I interview users or prospects, or like audiences. Like I prepare a few questions, like following the user UX experience or UX design questions. I just prepare a few questions, and I just let users speak about their needs, about what are the needs in their own terms, because usually and often companies talk about their services in terms of the solutions that they offer, and not by the topics or words that users use. So I make sure to interview from, let's say 5 to 10. 10 is better, or sometimes 15 if it's a very niche topic of users or target audiences, to know better what their language is. Social media platforms provide very good insights as well on what are the topics and terms, especially like if there are groups within the local community as well. Sometimes I put polls on social media, and I interact with as well, like I call the company, the client services, I call them multiple times, just like to see what they like, what are behind those services. So I just like ask, yeah, you offer this service, what does it mean? So to get more like ideas. So yeah, it requires maybe more time, but then the results are actually much better. Even if the website, let's say, even if I'm optimizing for a market that has bigger search volumes, I still apply many of the process that I apply for lower search volumes, because I find it always very useful to do some user interviews, especially at the beginning of the project, to know better about the users and what's like, yeah, what to work on the website. It helps really give a better perspective about the project at hand.
Yes, and I would imagine it results in a lot more conversions for the business if you really understand what's actually happening instead of simply relying on a third-party tool and calling it good and moving it on.
Yeah. Or especially identifying
It's risky.
where communication gaps may be.
Mhm.
I feel like that's a lot of I think just kind of almost like periphery benefits that sometimes SEO provides, is you realize like, hey, your sales team and the customer service team are not speaking the same language, whether it's actually physically or, you know, they're just using very different terms, or they're framing things very differently, right? So love that you do that, and also love that you call out it's, you know, part of the user experience, really just getting to that UX. Because I agree, I think SEO is a huge part of UX, and there's just so much we can learn from each other on that side. So
Definitely. And it's amazing that you're taking that next step to really get the value out of the users and the persona, etc. It's like, here, Nadia. Not many SEOs do that, so I really appreciate it.
Thank you. I'm pleased to hear that. I really encourage SEOs to really apply lots of user research within the process, because it's always rewarding to discover really what really works. And not simply keywords.
Internationalization and international markets come with their own challenges, and it's sometimes companies believe that it's time to leave. So when it comes to the exit strategies, how do you successfully exit an international market?
I can jump in here a little bit, and Nadia, would love to hear your perspective as well. So I think it's important to keep in mind when you're exiting an international market that there's a lot of reasons why you'd exit a market. They can be SEO related, or they can be completely unrelated. You might not have customer service. You might have overextended yourself. There might be changes to the pricing for shipping, right? Actually, that leads me to another question. I'd be really curious if what the legalities are working with, because we work with a lot of compliance or legal teams in order to make that, we just work in regulated industries a lot. So therefore we work with compliance teams, and therefore working across countries would add an extra layer of complexity, right? So if there are any additions there, I'd be interested in hearing stories that you might have there, Nadia. Someone remind me to bring it back around to that question. But in terms of actually successfully exiting the market, so I've done this for a well-known beauty brand that you'd buy in any department store before. They had done the typical thing that companies do historically, which is they just, they got translations, and not even translations, they just, popped up a top-level domain version in 12-ish different markets. I think some were English, some were French, German, all the typical places that a global beauty brand would want to go to. And it wasn't customized. It was not a great experience. Sometimes products weren't available in certain areas. It was just all over, just not a successful deploy. So it was time for this beauty brand to pull things back and restart. So you can think about the SEO, maximizing the SEO return on this change, or at least minimizing the SEO pain of pulling back. But I also want to make sure that we think through the user implications of, you just stopped shipping to this market, or you didn't stop shipping to this market, but you stopped, offering a dedicated language for them to be able to shop for their blush or mascara or whatever. They chose not really to focus on the user perspective. So I'll focus on that first, which is a tool that I think is really vastly underutilized, is to build functionality with your engineering development teams to basically issue an interstitial. So it's sort of like a pop-up, but it's in the screen, it's not separate. Or one of those banners at the top of your screen that has messaging for the user to help them understand what happened. And you can trigger that based on the redirect source. If you can identify that in the user logs, you can use that refer, or sorry, I'm getting lots of text messages coming through. Go away. You can use that to message to users exactly what happened. So I would consider strongly putting out a press release on your website or something that explains that you're exiting a market, and are you still helping those customers or not? There's messaging, things you should do to communicate what happened and why. Then certain pages that get retired make sense to redirect to that page. And then you can message that. But sometimes it makes sense that for blush A and blush B to just get consolidated and put back together, right? So if you issue that redirect, so instead of just sending them to the .com, explain what happened with that messaging, and you can always link to that page for more information. So the key is really just communicating with your user what happened, why, how it will impact them or not. So that's definitely a tool I'd recommend. In terms of actually just setting up the SEO pieces, I mean, that's really a matter of, frankly, 301 redirects. Again, hopefully with good messaging users, but just making sure you do the detailed mapping to make sure they go to all the right places, to consolidate like with like. Doing a good job with that. That's my general answer from an SEO perspective. Obviously, there's other things involved, non-SEO and exiting a market, but those are the things to think through. Nadia, anything to add to that? Or
yeah, absolutely. I just would like to add maybe, just like the timing to start like a couple of months ahead of time, and definitely it just like to just like make sure that everybody can see it, like, or more of a larger audience can, or website users can see it. It's just like fully, like have coverage on that on the website as much as possible where relevant, and as well like do it ahead of time so that to make sure everybody use it. And as you said, Tori, that's to as well to include other tools that help with SEO, like emails, like customer emails, or specific communication. If there is a call center, to include it within the calls, actually integrated into the other part of the organized or the company tools.
Just some questions for y'all. When a company has been exiting a market, normally I think one of the natural questions that would come up from internal teams is, hey, how much of a hit are we going to take on our website? How much is traffic going to decrease? What would you predict? I think the obvious answer would be just look at what traffic is going to those pages or from that market. Obviously you're going to lose that. How much impact have you typically seen in other pieces of the visibility, if any at all?
I have experienced an exit to the market once, and the effect was actually there was a drop on the on the impressions and clicks, but it has recovered within for the other markets. It has recovered after a couple of months, so it wasn't that big shock to the website. So the impressions and clicks were not that much for the from that market that we exited from, and at the same time it wasn't profitable business. So even if there were clicks and there were conversions happening, they were not. So what I'm trying to say is that profitability also is one of the KPIs to put into account. And when it comes to the SEO, it went a little bit down, but then it recovered after a couple of months. So there was not really a big hit on profitability at the end of the way.
Okay, very good.
On my end, there was not much of a hit, but I think that was largely because it was never particularly helpful in the first place. They were mostly, they were deploying and seeing if they could just maximize revenue through, a low cost way to go international that didn't work. So it was just an effort that failed, that, never took off. There wasn't a
shocking. You have to put in effort.
Yeah, I know. Associated with suddenly trying to double or triple or quadruple your revenue. Who knew? So consolidating that, if anything, was a benefit, especially in terms of the duplicate content nature of same language content. So the different site for the UK, the different site for Australia, et cetera, like consolidating that no longer cost that problem. So, if anything, there were links from those areas that were now, part of the main domain. So that went well.
Okay, very cool.
But yeah, just to Nadia's point, if you actually had traction in that market, that's going to be a lot more painful. And yeah, you should do your research to make sure you understand what that pain is going to be, so the business is well prepared to handle it.
Yeah, which we have seen those due to compliance or legal reasons. You have to remove yourself from a market, right? Like government regulations have changed or import-export laws. And that is painful. That is so painful for so many reasons. So, yeah.
Oh, and I thought of one more thing in terms of exiting the market. So the original question, how to exit an international market, came from Women in Tech SEO, and the company, I believe, was based in the UK, and I think they were pulling out of an Australian market. I could be wrong about that, but they had been there a long time. They loved their customers there. They had really strong connections with them, so they really cared about that user experience. So we did chat through and talk through some opportunities to, like, what do you do to help those users? Not only are you not, because in this case they weren't shipping their physical products there anymore, what do you do to help those users? So some of the things we discussed as a solution could be on that page where you message what's happening. You could, if you have relationships with other vendors that, previous competitors that aren't competitors anymore, that you want to make sure you promote, that they could help, you could promote them on your site. You could put affiliate links to your site and link to them in order to, open up a small new revenue stream, or a big one if those were customers that were meaningful and were spending money, but you left for whatever legal reasons. What else did we discuss? Sometimes there's tools for people to get things shipped remotely. So if you have a credit card and you can purchase in another country, some credit cards enable that and some don't, obviously. So like, what are those providers that allow you to ship between one versus the other? So I'm physically based in Canada now, and shipping things to Canada is actually rather complicated. And so there are services that help you set up like a PO box in America, so I can get it shipped there, and then they can be the intermediary and ship it to me. So you could set up those kinds of solutions. You could offer these to your customers as like, what are your workarounds to buy for me? Where do you buy in your local market? What are the good providers? So again, think through the actual human impact of what you're doing, and how do you help those users, because maybe things will change in the future and you want to go back and you want to have not completely dropped the ball and screwed a bunch of people. So people remember stuff like that, and
yeah, for sure,
maybe being thoughtful will help them.
I was just going to say that you left me wondering if, like, getting a partnership with the marketplaces in that country would be an option, unless they are like withdrawing their products for legal reasons and compliance things from that country. So yeah, maybe that can be an option to promote their goods too.
Yeah, I think this was more of like maybe a Brexit, or like they couldn't, but that doesn't mean everybody couldn't, right? So, but that's a great call out.
Yeah, I will say though, unfortunately, I have seen when it comes to legal and compliance, Nadia, I know you mentioned like try to do planning at least a few months in advance. Unfortunately, if it's legal, usually marketing gets like a week heads up. So it can be a little bit of a scramble. Would love to hear what are y'all's thoughts, because we are talking about how we need to focus on the user and we need to think about the human. And so I think, for me, sometimes that does mean that kind of those rules or general guidelines that we would have for SEO can sometimes be subverted, or just kind of throw them out for a little bit, because again, it's thinking about that user first. So an example of one of those things I'm thinking about, Tori, we're talking about setting up, really the pages that communicate what has changed. So, even is it a possibility that you would want to redirect to a page that explains and then has a client-based redirect instead of a server redirect or something like that? I think those experiences are worth talking about, because SEO is so subjective, right? So where do you fall on that that line.
That's a great way to communicate, to lead. You can also think about your internal linking from the page that you create. So what are you emphasizing? So if you're then redirecting it back to that main page and explaining it, maybe they can still buy and ship from your site, but they can't, it's not necessarily in a different language, or it's just not localized like it used to be. You could still link to your key product categories or key product pages from there. And so all the link equity that's gone to this particular page then would get spread back into the site in that way. So being thoughtful about how to help them, but that would be much less helpful in the scenario in which you can't ship to them. So think about what can you do with that? And then maybe you don't get the SEO benefits of that internal linking if you can't actually support that user. So it wouldn't matter sort of anyway. Anything?
Yeah. I have seen one solution that I've really loved, because cases where it was like they weren't allowed to advertise the product anymore in a certain market. So you could still have it available, but any of like the promotional or paid marketing had to stop. And that included things like sale prices. Those products were no longer eligible to be in the sale items. So one thing I really loved is so the landing pages or the pages that were previously targeted at that market and were localized to that market, because there were some language switchers and all that good stuff. If you clicked into a products page, we actually had, so I've seen it where we had an interstitial, which of course usually we're like, bad. Interstitials are bad. But this one I feel like communicated a needed message, right? It actually was relevant. So we've done that, or we also have just like banners that show up on the product page. And so it's a little bit of dynamic serving, right? Or programmatic. But that's definitely one of my favorite things I've seen implemented that we got to coach on. And just think about that user. Nadia, what about your experiences?
For me, I mean, the experience that I have been through was the product was not profitable in that market. So it was like the costs were like higher than the profits. And what we did is that we have redirected the links from that specific version into the English version. And yes, that was a good solution for that case.
Love it.
Yep.
Painful to hear for the company, though.
It happens.
What can you do?
Yeah. What you can do is you hire Nadia to help you correctly exit the market.
Yes.
There you go.
With
That's
pleasure.
what you do. That's what you do.
With pleasure.
Or deploy there successfully in the first place. So you get enough sales so that it is profitable.
That, yeah.
Yes, maybe there are opportunities untapped, or if it's because of a profit loss or something related that is not legal, as you mentioned, Tori.
Yeah. All kinds of reasons.
I think it was our second episode that I was kind of bragging about how international we are, being from Canada, US, and Turkey. And today, with internationalization for SEO, we became even more international. So thank you for joining us, Nadia. It was wonderful having you.
I just wanted to say thank you very much.
I wanted to also say thank you for coming, and also say make sure to submit your SEO questions to thegray.company/ask SEO questions. We want to hear from you and answer those questions. So let us know what you want to hear from us.
Yeah, and especially because we have certain things planned for the next episode in the Gray.company. And yeah, we're going to be coming with another surprise guest, and yeah, it's going to be as brilliant as this episode. Looking forward to it already.
Excited.
Maybe to be published on another Monday, right, Sam?
Okay, we can do that. Yes.
Yep, let's do it.
All right.
Wonderful. Thank you for joining us, everyone.
Thank you for coming to another episode of Opinionated SEO Opinions. Thanks.